Your Spurs are still facing a deficit 2-1. Can they tie up the series before heading back to San Antonio? What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Spurs in Focus right here on YouTube, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon Podcasts. Also, don't forget about the Substack. Spurs in Focus Substack is completely free. Go sign up today. I am your host, Jeff Garcia, longtime Spurs writer in San Antonio. Thank you for making Spurs in Focus your first and only spot for all things San Antonio Spurs. We definitely appreciate it. Yeah. Well, first of all, happy Spurs Day. And what are we talking about today? Duh. Game 4 is tonight. Spurs still find themselves in a deficit versus the Knicks 1-2, but they got a little momentum. They finally got the win in Game 3, a chance to tie things up before the scene shifts to San Antonio for Game 5. Hopefully it's a 2-2 split and not a 3-1 deficit. We're going to look back at Game 3. What went right for the Spurs? Can that carry over into Game 4? What do they got to do tonight in MSG to make this a 2-2 series? And then give our predictions. So much more. We're going to read something from De'Aaron Fox when at least he thought it was key to the Spurs winning Game 3. My big key threes, well, 3 keys for the Spurs to get a W, and so much more. It's going to bring in our guest. He has been with us through the Spurs playoff run. It is our very own playoff reporter, Mr. Hector Ledesma. He also writes for Clutch Points. Follow him on X at Hector Ledesma TV. And Hector, we got ourselves a series, don't we now?
Yeah, totally changed. And I think the Spurs finally did what we around here, what we knew.
Yeah.
They were capable of doing earlier in the series. They finally put it together in Game 3.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, it changes the trajectory from here on out. But if the Spurs lose tonight, they're still in a hole. You know, you mentioned the deficit. They're still in a big hole if they lose tonight. So the job nowhere near done.
Yeah, it's not even close. And one thing I like, let's talk about Game 3. It went right, but one thing I think needs to get highlighted was after the win, I didn't see them celebrating. I didn't see them pumping their fists. I didn't see them gathering on the court in a huddle and cheering and acting like they won the title. They got the win, walked off the court, and even as they walked into the tunnel, you saw minimal cheering. I think Victor was the only one kind of doing a little fist pump and, slapping hands with his friends, but with his teammates. But that's it. And I thought that was very good because that tells me their mindset, that they know that they're still in a deficit. They still are facing, another do or die game tonight in Game 4. So I thought that was great. But one thing I want to ask you before we get into our X's and O's and all that good stuff, we've been talking about the Spurs in Game 1 and Game 2, how they let the Knicks steal it, how it was the Spurs that should have won. Could you say the same thing about Game 3? But the Knicks gave that one away, that the Knicks should have won.
It's always in the eye of the beholder, Jeff. I often do this at halftime of every game, not just the finals, not just the playoffs. At halftime of every game that I'm covering, I kind of try to step outside myself and look at it objectively. And when I say objectively, I don't mean from a Spurs fan perspective, but just a Spurs perspective. Because I cover the Spurs. I don't cover the Knicks. I don't cover the Thunder. I don't cover the Blazers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I know about the Spurs much more than I do anybody else. That's what I mean in terms of the perspective. So I try to step outside that. And I go, okay, really when you break it down, because this side can say this about the first half. This side can say this about the first half. Right. When you break it down, honestly, truly, who would you rather be? And in Games 1 and 2, you could very easily make the case that you would because the Knicks were up 2-0. But you had good standing if you're the Spurs to look at that and say, and it's kind of funny, Jeff, because Games 1 and 2, the Spurs let them slip away, but in different ways.
You're right.
Like in Game 1, they got off to the fast start, which is the theme in this series for them. They had the 14-point lead in the third. And New York wouldn't go away. Right. But honestly, I got the sense, and this may sound silly to say, considering they're up 2-1 and they could take a 3-1 lead. I felt throughout those first 3 quarters, and really for a good part of the fourth in Game 1, it felt. We've been watching sports for a long time, right? We've been covering sports for a long time. We've been around sports for even longer. You know that feeling you get where there's a team that won't go away, but it's not as good as the other team. They just won't go away. And if you give them a chance, they'll bite you.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the Knicks felt like in game one.
Gotcha.
That's what it felt like to me in game one. Now, they ended up winning by 10, right? But Brunson hits the 3 that puts them ahead. And then from there, kind of the wheels fall off for the Spurs down the stretch. And really that 10-point difference was a little bit deceiving. So that's what I was thinking going into game 2 is it really felt like the Knicks were a really hot team that's playing well, not as good, but they're playing extremely well. And hey, they rode that momentum into a game 1 win. Game 2, it's the Knicks who go up big in the second half, right? First come all the way back. And in the fourth quarter, again, the Knicks looked take away the final stage, take away Knicks across, take away Brunson on the back. In the fourth quarter of game 2, they looked like just another playoff team frantically trying not to lose a lead on the road. And they did. The Spurs ended up going 1, and then, the turnover to Castle and the missed shots by Wemby, And again, it kind of felt like, are they necessarily the better team? Like, they're playing better for 48 minutes than the Spurs are. Are they the better team? And so when I hear Steph Castle insisting on saying, I believe we're the better team, and if we put an effort together, I think we'll be okay. Mitch Johnson said something similar after game 2. We play our brand of basketball. It'll be fine. I didn't take that as overconfidence or delusion. I got exactly where they were coming from. I understand because that's what I saw. Game 3, you saw that. Now, here's the thing, and here's the really long way of answering your question, Jeff.
Yeah.
Here's the thing in terms of, can the Knicks say the same thing? The Knicks got a fantastic game from OG.
They did.
Wonderful game. Both ends of the floor. Never mind how spectacular he was on offense. Both ends of the floor. He was lights out. Josh Hart played really, really well. Brunson gave another. Brunson was what Brunson's been in games 1 and 2. In other words, Brunson wasn't lights out, or wasn't like Brunson didn't disappear, regressed anything in game 3. Cat and Mikal Bridges were kind of like, So you figure they're gonna play better, but if Cat plays better, then Anunoby is not gonna probably have the game that he's gonna have. If Mikal Bridges hits 4 3-pointers next game, then Josh Hart probably doesn't hit 4 3-pointers. So that kind of stuff cancels itself out. If you're the Spurs, your 2 best players in game 3 were Wemby and Castle. You expect that on some level that is going to continue to happen. Just like Jalen Brunson is going to continue to get 30 points, right? Like, you can't rely on Jalen Brunson having a 16-point game. That ain't going to happen. Right. So for the Spurs, it wasn't like Julian Champagnie went absolutely nuts, or Keldon Johnson came back, the revival of Keldon Johnson. And so that's why the Spurs were able to get one. No, they were able to win with what Castle and Wemby given them is what Castle and Wemby have given them. Wemby have given them this year. De'Aaron Fox and Dylan Harper left a lot of meat on the bone in that game 3, Jeff. They did. De'Aaron, we're going to remember the game winner, and rightfully so, but boy, did he struggle from the field. Harper was 1 of 8 from 3-point range. If those guys are even incrementally better, Julian isn't awful, Devin isn't awful, and Castle and Wemby give you 3/4 of what they gave you in game 3, you're fine. You're good. And so that's the question now is, given how every single possession and every single game matters right now, especially when you're down 2-1, can you need that? Like, there's no margin for error. So to me, that's the bigger thing is, in other words, if these teams played a 21-game series, I'd still put money on the Spurs. Right. But it's not. The Spurs can only lose 1 more game to these guys. And so that's what makes you go, because of that hole they put themselves in. Right. But again, the really long way of answering your question is, like, if you're from a Spurs perspective, if you're from the Knicks, you can say the Knicks
gave it to them
away. Yeah. But the Spurs could have played a whole lot better as well as units.
Yeah. And that's what's interesting about the series so far. You can make that argument for every game for both sides of the court. You could say, well, Knicks, you mentioned in game 2, you guys fell apart in the second half and almost let that slip away. Spurs, as you highlighted very well in the first 2 games, that should have been theirs. It's game 3 for the Knicks. So that's how close this series has been. And it's interesting, Hector, neither team has really dominated either side. You haven't really seen the Spurs just put it on the Knicks and vice versa. So that's why this game 4 tonight is going to be interesting, is because whoever sets the tone. And so far it's been the Spurs, and you're right. I think that does give the edge to the Spurs as far as them being the better team. They're usually the ones coming out swinging. They're usually the ones coming out with a lead. For a while there, game 3 felt exactly like game 2. It was almost a carbon copy. It was Spurs came out hot. Knicks make a furious comeback. They take the lead in the half. They take control in the third, and then it gets interesting in the fourth. And that's what it felt like. The same thing for game 3. It felt like the record scratching and repeating. Fortunately for the Spurs, they got the W. But Hector, one thing about game 3 and now into game 4, I'm going to ask you is, does it feel like Mitch is kind of coaching with one arm behind his back? Because he's not going very deep in his bench. Your thoughts?
I think he's coaching with one arm behind his back, if that's the way you want to put it, but out of necessity.
Okay.
Harrison Barnes, if I'm not mistaken, didn't play a minute in game 3, right?
Didn't play, yeah.
Yeah. Carter Bryant played just a couple.
Yeah, 3 actually.
Hit that corner 3. Hit that corner 3, but he only played 3 minutes. And honestly, Jeff, if you can make the argument that if he had somebody else to play, Keldon might not see the floor as much. Keldon's not seeing the floor as much as it is. But if he had another alternative, Mitch did, I think maybe you wouldn't be seeing Keldon, for the stretches of time that you're seeing Keldon.
Right.
He had a better game 3 than he had games 1 and 2, but he still did some things that made you go, "Oh, come on, Keldon,"
Yeah, exactly.
So I think he's doing that, but I think them moving Vic off Cat was huge in that now you don't need as many Wemby off the floor minutes, because as we've gotten deeper in the playoffs, Cornette struggled, in terms of, he was better in game 3, but it's safe to say this, Jeff, right? Like, let's be honest. It's safe to say this. Luke Cornette was much better in the regular season than he has been in the playoffs.
Absolutely. Yes, he has.
In the Thunder series, you could maybe chuck that up to, they're a bad matchup for him. Well, those are and you can say the kind of the same thing here in this series with Cat and Mitchell Robinson, But that's the reality of the playoffs. As you get further in, there's going to be teams that can take away certain role players. And he's a role player, if you will, that can be taken away.
Yeah.
You can make the argument that Keldon, to a certain extent, is you were kind of seeing that in the playoffs. So because of that, he's had to shrink the bench. And when he's tried to give Barnes minutes, Harrison is nowhere near what he was at the beginning of the season, in the first third of the season, when he was pretty reliable out there. That he was shooting the 3 well. He would
remember, yep.
And he led the team in scoring a couple of times, in that first third of the season. Mitch is really having to figure out a way to get these lineups, get the most out of the lineups that he can, given the matchups on the courts.
So what went right for the Spurs in game 3? Was it simply just, them maintaining leads and showing that poise when they did lose the lead throughout the game, and especially surviving that disastrous second quarter where the Knicks put 40 plus on them in just one period? Was it just simply them maybe growing up a little bit in these first 3 games of the NBA Finals?
They were more intentional, Jeff.
Okay.
Essentially, that's what it was. I'm going to see if this makes sense.
Okay.
There's a belief in basketball, and it's true, right? I shouldn't call it like a belief. Like, it's very true. If you have an open shot, take it. Like, don't pass up a good shot, right? I think what gets lost in that sometimes is, if you're not shooting well from a particular spot, or if a certain guy's not shooting well, that doesn't mean he necessarily. Now, if it's Kobe, keep shooting. If it's Steph Curry, keep shooting.
Yeah.
If it's Reggie Miller, keep shooting. Right? Not everybody is those guys. So if it's not falling for you that night, even if you're open, look to see if maybe you can do something different. Attack the paint, collapse the defense. They were more intentional, and I haven't even gotten to Vic yet about going inside and not just being around the 3-point line. That's part of the being intentional, but I haven't even gotten there yet. What they did, Jeff, is when they swung it and they had ball movement, they weren't content to just take the first open shot. They would go into the lane, dribble penetration. They would draw defenders. They would kick. They got they got some easier offense. They were more intentional with what they wanted to do. They weren't just content with swinging it. Hey, there's a 3 on the wing. You're open. Take it. Yes, they took those. It's a different league. The 3-point game is the three-pointer is a much bigger part of the game than it was just a couple of years ago. So you don't give that up, but you do look to make things happen inside the paint, inside the 3-point arc, and then that leads to Vic. Very first possession of game 3, he had an open jumper. He chose not to take it. He went inside instead. You can argue that it made for a more difficult shot than what would have been an open midi, but he ended up collapsing defense. I think the Spurs, if I'm not mistaken, I actually think they didn't get points out of it. I don't think they scored on either of the first 2, maybe first 3 possessions of game 3. But it set the tone. It set the tone for we're not going to settle tonight. We're going to put pressure on the rim. We're going to get inside with force. And I think that, to me, was the difference throughout the whole 48 is they played with some more intention.
Yeah, and I used the big word for me when we did a reaction to the show yesterday night was I just saw them a little bit less rattled. That was my biggest fear going into game 3 was the hype. I mean, the hype, you can feel it in the air. Oh, it's MSG. It's since 1999. The city, this fan base in New York City. Oh, they're coming. They're coming, Spurs. You haven't seen anything like this. I was hoping it wouldn't get into their young mindset, and it didn't. It didn't. Especially how they for me, what was impressed how they recovered from that second period coming out of halftime and just started to take more control of the game. And they also too weathered that kind of I think it was a +7 run that the Knicks did to almost make things very interesting and maybe possibly force overtime towards the end of the game. Just playing smart basketball. And one thing I did like about them is they got to the free throw line in that fourth period. I think they got there 10 times and they hit on all 10 with Castle making those 2 clutch free throws towards the end of that fourth period. So little things like that made me feel like, okay, are they kind of getting it now? Are they kind of figuring things out how they have to attack this Knicks team, which makes it interesting game 4 tonight in MSG. We're talking with our very own Spurs in Focus playoff reporter. He is Hector Ledesma. He also helps out and writes for Clutch Points. You want to follow him on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Let's talk about game 4 tonight in MSG series. Again, 2-1 Knicks with the edge right now. What do you got to see from this Spurs team tonight to get this series tied up?
A lot of what we saw in game 3. Now, here's the thing. I mentioned Mikal Bridges and Towns earlier. They're going to play better in game 4. I would be shocked if they're not better in game 4. But as I mentioned, I think that Anunoby kind of comes back to the mean a little bit. I think Hart doesn't hit 4 3-pointers.
Exactly.
We'll see if I'm wrong, but they're going to play better. And so the defense, the Spurs defense was fantastic for the better part of game 3. They need to continue that. I think Wemby not being on Cat is huge. I think you're going to continue to see that. The Knicks will try to get him out of the paint. They'll try to do everything they can to try to get Victor out of the paint. But offensively, a lot more the same. It's no coincidence, Jeff, that Steph Castle had his best game of the series.
Absolutely.
And it's the game they won. Wemby had his best game of the series, and it's the game they won. For me, it boils down to this, Jeff. And I talked to a friend before the series, breaking down the series, and he had a good argument. He was telling me he thinks the Knicks are a tough matchup for the Spurs, and if you look at the regular season, that proves it out. He thought the Knicks would beat the Spurs, and I said, look, that very well could happen, but I think you're overlooking something here. at the end of the day, and it's the most basic thing in sports. The get off the bus test.
Mm-hmm.
When the two teams get off the bus, which team, talent-wise, is the better team?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are a lot of teams where pieces fit. We know that full well with the 2014 Spurs, right? Tim was no longer dominant. Manu was no longer Manu. Tony was the only one who was kind of in his prime, and he was at the end of it. Kawhi wasn't yet Kawhi.
Right.
But that team, with all that wonderful talent, was more the sum of its parts, really. It was a team. The way they played was just, hence the beautiful game, right? It was beautiful. That's the Knicks this year. The Knicks are the sum of their parts. Put both rosters together, 1 through 15 on the Knicks, 1 through 15 on the Spurs. Put those 30 players together and have a draft.
I see where you're going with this.
Vic goes 1 and Brunson goes 2, right?
2, exactly. Yep.
Who goes 3?
I would take Harper.
Who goes 4?
Cat.
You go Cat over Fox or Castle?
Yeah.
Okay. Who goes 5?
Castle.
Who goes 6?
Fox.
4 of the top 6 players of the 30 are Spurs.
Spurs, yeah.
Including the guy who changes the game at both ends like no one ever has.
Yeah, exactly.
So if the Spurs' best players play well, they are going to win this. They can win this series, and they are going to win this series.
Right.
You know, it really is, for all of the stuff that we talk about, and it's fun. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but for all of that, at the end of the day, no matter how you get there, whatever strategy you put in place to get your best players in the best positions, if your best players play well, you're going to win. And the Spurs have more better players than do the Knicks.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was just gonna wrap up and say, now, to be clear, that doesn't mean that if Shamet doesn't go crazy or if Alvarado doesn't go nuts, that doesn't mean that
Clarkson has yet to go off. Yeah.
Game 7, 2013. Everybody remembers Ray Allen in Game 6. What people forget about Game 7 is Shane Battier hit 6 3-pointers. Right? Like, yes, LeBron went for 38 in Game 7, but Shane Battier hit 6 3-pointers. Yep. You need that. But if LeBron doesn't give you 38, Shane Battier's 6 threes don't matter.
Exactly.
LeBron scored 38. That was it in Game 7. If your best players play well, in 2003, Tim Duncan, the near quadruple double in the clinching Game 6. You know, when in that same year when the Spurs knocked off the Lakers in Game 6 in LA. Shaq, Tim going against Shaq. What was it, 36 and like 20?
Yeah.
You know?
Ridiculous. Yeah.
If your best players play well, now you can't expect those kinds of performances all the time. But if your best players play better than their best players, and your best players are better than their best players, you're going to be in good position. And we did it in the first 2 games. We saw it in Game 3. We'll see it. We'll see it in Game 4.
Yeah, exactly. And it brings me to my things that I have to see in Game 4 tonight. And MSJ, I'll put them on your screen here. I think we covered this one already. You got to have more win. We continue to establish him, give him those lobs. I think it was highlighted, Hector, that going into Game 3, there was only 1 lob attempt towards Wemby. In Game 3, he had several, and he connected on most of them there. So that's good. And I like that. Continue to establish him near the rim. Heck, there are times I caught myself during the broadcast seeing Victor at the 3 line and looking like he's getting the ball, like the line's ready. I was like, no, Vic, don't, please don't do that. Just take it to the rim. And fortunately, he did for the most part. One thing I did like in Game 3, and that needs to continue to Game 4, is be the more physical team. I know Knicks fans are griping right now. They're flipping tables, you know, with the Wemby, look like an elbow push on Brunson in the back. But again, setting the tone that we are the physical team, that we're going to come at you. We're going to bully the bullies. We're going to bully you guys back. And I like that. You saw Castle just being aggressive. So all in all, I need this team to be, again, continue to be physical and share the ball. 28 assists in game 3. It wasn't completely dominated by Wemby, although he had a phenomenal game. But you saw the ball movement. And I bring this up because De'Aaron Fox, he actually highlighted that after the game 3 when he was speaking to the media. He says, quote, when we're moving the ball, regardless of who it is, the ball finds who it needs to find. We continue to play that way. Like I said, we don't want to come here and then change what we're doing. There's a reason why he got there. So for Fox, you see on your screen, he felt the ball movement was key in game 3. I'm going to put these back here for you, Hector. Your thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely right. Now, and I want to make sure that I blend which is very important with what I said a little while ago about moving the ball. Yes, continue to move the ball. I'm not saying per what I said earlier. I don't mean ISO attack, try to drink somebody, try to break somebody off the dribble. Well, no, move the ball. But when somebody's closing out, instead of moving over and staying behind the 3-point line, take a dribble, go inside. Now you got defenders scrambling. And guess what? That also opens up the lob. Even if Cornette's down there, that opens up the lob because now a big is having to commit to try to stop either a midi or trying to prevent the offensive player from getting to the cup. And so you move the ball primarily with the pass, but you can also move it with quick dribble drives.
Right. Yeah. And I love that. I mean, they're minimal turnovers we saw for the Spurs. I think another one, I just didn't have room on the graphic here, is continue to attack because they are getting to the free throw lines. We highlighted in game 3 how key those free throws were in the fourth period when the game was still kind of in the balance. So there's that. But no, I mean, the other intangibles too is, the Knicks, for them, you got to, if you're a Knicks fan, you got to be thinking, you pretty much give this Spurs team another loss. And that could be all she wrote, even though, yes, I know it's first to 4. But a 3-1 lead for the Knicks going to game 5, it just does wonders for them. I think it's safe to say, Hector, would we elevate game 4 tonight into a do or die, or maybe something less, like just a must win?
It's a must win, right? It's a must win because, again, I think they're better than the Knicks, but
they are on paper. They are. Yeah.
But you don't want to have to try to beat them 3 games in a row because they're playing extremely well. They're a very good team. Let's call them a great team. I'm cool with that. Fine. Yeah. They're a great team playing at a really high level. You do not want to put yourself in a spot where you got to beat the 3 teams. You already put yourself in a tough spot as it is by having to beat them minimum 4 times in 5 games.
Jeez,
So yes, I guess it's semantics, Jeff. Do or die. I'll put it to you this way. The reason I hesitate to call it do or die is because if the Spurs go down 3-1, I don't think the series is necessarily over. Like I in other words, I'm not running to Vegas and putting money down on, yes, the Knicks are definitely going to close this out. I ain't doing that. But if they're down 3-1, even with 2 of the next 3 in San Antonio, yeah, that's a heck of an ask against a team that's playing as well as the Knicks are. Because here's the thing, man, like we've seen kind of runs like these before. I would even put the 99 Spurs, kind of maybe ironic considering the Spurs and the Knicks met in the 99 finals.
Exactly.
The 99 Spurs, again, another team that was kind of the sum of its parts were greater, right? Like Tim, as great as he was in 99, wasn't yet Tim. Dave was no longer Dave. Sean was past his prime and, was dealing with the kidney thing that we didn't know about yet. I mean, that 99 team won a championship with a starting backcourt of Avery Johnson and Mario Elliott. God bless them, love them, but not exactly the stuff of like, oh my goodness, super team.
Going up against with Latrell Sprewell and was it?
But that 99 team was on this kind of a run. Like they just at a high level, just boom, boom, boom. We're just mowing people down, all kinds of confidence, knew where the ball wanted to go. Very intentional with what they wanted to do, clamp down defense. They were just a great team playing at a very high level. The Knicks are repeating that. You don't want to put yourself in a 3-1 hole against that. But the thing is unlike 99, where the Spurs were clearly better than an undermanned Knicks team, I don't think you can say the Knicks are clearly better than this Spurs team. All that being said, 2-2 as opposed to 3-1 completely changes everything.
Yeah, it really does. You think the refs going to call it a little differently? You saw Mike Brown post game 3. He, in his way, he kind of went off on the refs, citing the foul
Maybe
camps.
that's
I can see that being a big factor tonight.
That's an interesting point. So Spurs fans, be prepared. Be prepared to get those whistles that make you go, "What?"
Yeah,
or "How?"
probably coming.
Or "How come not on the other end?" Be prepared. You're going to see a couple of those. Now, will it make a difference in the end? We'll see. We'll see. But
as tight as this series has been, Hector, I could see it making a difference at the end.
Yeah. I kind of tend to be a believer where unless a call happens late in a game, that's kind of like, whoa, you got to let them play. Outside of that, I know this is kind of boring and dull, and it could be completely wrong, but I honestly do think those things tend to even themselves out more often than not, especially over the course of the series. But we'll see. We'll see how much. I guess in terms of the outcome of the game. Well, in terms of, more specific than that, we'll see in terms of if the Spurs play well, it will be a lot less of a factor. If the Spurs aren't playing well and they're not shooting well, and again, the Spurs didn't shoot well from 3-point range in Game 3.
They did not.
If that continues and they don't get a wonderful effort from Castle and a great effort from Wemby, then the cause will matter more.
Yeah, exactly.
And if Fox and Castle and Harper aren't better.
Yeah, exactly. You look at what was that? Game 3? Yeah, I got it here. By the way, they went to the free throw line 32 times in game 3. Yeah, they got to the free throw line, so that's definitely got to keep it going. They made 12 3-pointers, so that's good. But they shot about 35% from the 3 line, which is good. So that shot's falling, and that's been the key since the regular season and through the playoff run. If the Spurs are knocking down their outside shots consistently, they're a headache.
If the Spurs are knocking down the 3-point shot, they're nearly unbeatable. And Oklahoma City found that out in the fourth quarter of Game 7.
Exactly.
Really, that was the difference. The Spurs made clutch shots after clutch shots, including several from beyond the arc in that Game 7. And I know you can say that about anybody. You can be like, well, duh, yeah. If anybody hits their threes, they're pretty much going to. The difference is the Spurs have the guys who can knock those down. Everybody on the court can hit. Well, we talked about Barnes earlier, right? And Bryant is still kind of figuring things out. But really, anybody they put on the court is capable of knocking down the 3-point shot. Outside of Luke Cornett, right? So anybody they put on the floor consistently can do that. And so if they're hitting the 3, they're darn near unbeatable.
Exactly. Yeah, we saw that again. Yeah, in Game 3 with Steph Castle hitting a very clutch 3-pointer to pretty much seal it for the Spurs. Hector, who are you going with tonight?
Woo! I don't know.
Oh man, this is tough. Man, this one's tough.
It's tough. Don't hate me.
Go for it.
I think the Knicks go up 3-1.
Okay.
Weird feeling. Oh no! Hey! We've talked about this before on your show. My gut feeling has been terrible this year.
Hey, we're okay, Hector. We'll go with that. Then.
Remember, I said the Lakers would beat the Spurs in the Cup, and then I said, well, I think the Blazers will take the Spurs to 6. And then I think in the conference finals, I was like, well, no, I don't think we talked. Did we talk during the conference?
I don't think we did in the conference finals. No.
So my gut reaction's been awful. Actually, we didn't talk about it, but going into Game 4 against the Thunder, Jeff, I remember thinking, I don't have a good feeling about this. I think the Thunder might have figured some things out. I remember thinking that going into Game 4 of that series. So my gut has been awful. So go with that. Go with that, Spurs fans, and that my gut has been awful.
Now I'm going to go with Hector's gut and go opposite because it seems to work. I'm going to go with the Spurs tying things up tonight, heading into Game 5. Everybody, I got the Spurs getting a W. 2-2, hopefully. By the way, if that happens, does any team win on their home court? I seriously, if Spurs drop 2 in there, Knicks drop 1 in theirs already, possibly tonight too. We'll see. It's been
again, Jeff. We'll see what happens, but I think unlike the 95 series against the Rockets, where the Spurs won in Houston, right? Remember that? They won the 2 in Houston after losing the first 2 here, and they came back here, and it's like brand new series, only to lose Game 5 at the Alamo Dome.
Yep.
I think there's less likelihood of that happening to these Spurs because, again, I think there's reason to believe these Spurs are better than the Knicks, whereas those Spurs, I don't know if they were better than those Elijah Drexler Rockets. I maybe they were. They certainly had a better record that year. They were the 1 seed. But I think there's just some differences in where I think there's a total reset, and I think they have an outstanding opportunity to take a 3-2 lead if it gets to that point.
He is Hector Ledesma. You want to follow him on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Also, he writes for Clutch Points, covers all things for the Spurs. So don't forget to check out those articles. And of course, he helps us out here at Spurs in Focus. He is our Spurs playoff reporter. He gives us those sideline reports, post-game reports, all that good stuff. Of course, I'm always appreciative of Hector and his efforts to help us here at the site. Hector, I'm pretty sure you got one lined up for us for game 5. Okay, but I actually thought that would be our last Spurs in Focus report from you after game 2, because I was like, oh my God, they're going to get swept at this rate. But I'm assuming you got something lined up for us after game 5.
Absolutely. Well, we'll recap game 5, and for the hope of Spurs fans, hopefully it's not the last game of the season. And for the optimal Spurs fans, hopefully it's a story about how the Spurs are going back to New York up 3-2.
Yeah, that'll be awesome. Look forward to that, Hector. Again, everybody follow him on X at Hector Ledesma TV. Thank you again, Hector, for taking time out of your schedule to join us here at Spurs in Focus. And we thank you all for making Spurs in Focus your first and only spot for all things San Antonio Spurs. Like I mentioned, follow Hector on X, Hector Ledesma TV. Follow me on X at Jeff G Spurs Zone. So give us your thoughts on what we talked about. What do you think about the series so far? What do you think about game 3? The Spurs win. What about tonight? Again, let us know. We got to hear from you. Subscribe wherever you get your favorite podcasts. iTunes, YouTube, obviously, YouTube Music, Amazon Podcast, Spurs in Focus, Substack, completely free. Go sign up right now. And we'll be back. See, later tonight, Rudy Campos and I will be doing a live reaction. And, of course, look forward to Hector's report very, very soon from Game 5. That's going to be awesome. And they're a hit, man. I see those comments that fans leave for you, Hector, saying thank you for this stuff. So they definitely appreciate it.
Well, much appreciated on my end. Thank you.
Exactly. Yeah, we appreciate y'all. So for Mr. Hector Ledesma, I am Jeff Garcia, and now you're in focus with Spurs in